met her on a Sunday night when the air over Phoenix still held on to the heat like a grudge. The app was full of sunlit smiles and dogs posed by waterfalls. She wasn't smiling. Her first photo was in a parking garage, fluorescent spill across her cheek, mouth set like a secret. The second was from somewhere red and enormous, maybe Sedona, a ridge cutting the sky into something that looked almost reasonable. Her bio said she liked iced tea and desert storms. Her messages said she was married. "I'm in a trap," she wrote, after the usual back and forth about favorite breakfasts and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. "Please don't judge me. I'm honest from the start." I told myself that counted. Honesty at the front looks like a boundary if you squint. I was a man who wanted to believe that telling the truth meant telling the whole truth, but I also wanted to believe her. The little dots bubbled. She told me he monitored her apps. We should move to text. We did. It felt like stepping from a crowded bar into a private booth, close enough to hear your own heartbeat. She said her name was Lena. She said she worked part-time at a boutique near Old Town Scottsdale and did bookkeeping for a friend's yoga studio. She sent a photo of her at a trailhead with a hat pulled low. I sent one from my kitchen, a bowl of oranges on the counter because apparently my brain thinks fruit equals trustworthiness. She sent a laughing emoji and said, "The oranges made me look like someone who could be patient." The next afternoon, she called on her lunch break, a short video we both pretended wasn't a big deal. I saw the same mouth set like a secret, but softer now. Her voice sounded like gravel and cotton. She said, "I don't have a lot of time." I said, "I can talk fast." She said, "No, I mean in my life. I'm planning my exit." The word exit did something to the room, made it feel taller. "Is he violent?" I asked, careful. "Not with his hands," she said. "He controls money and phones and people. It's a different kind of prison." I believed her because I wanted to, because part of me always wants to be the guy who shows up with a wrench and sets things right. We made a plan to meet somewhere safe, somewhere with cameras and strangers. We picked a hotel bar near the airport where everyone's face looks like a layover. She walked in wearing a denim jacket and sunglasses that made her look like a movie was trying to hide her. She took them off and smiled like she hadn't done it in a while. "I can do one drink," she said. "Then I have to go." One drink became two. Two became us in the elevator, both of us facing forward and pretending the mirrored walls were for someone else. We kissed in the doorway of a room I paid for because it felt easier than deciding not to. She pulled back once, a hand on my chest like a warning or a verse. "I'm married," she said again. "I know," I said. "We're two people on a planet doing a bad job." She laughed, and it broke something open in me I didn't know was still closed. We didn't sleep together. We lay on top of the covers and invented lives where we met at a coffee shop because the barista spelled both our names wrong, where we rented a house with a backyard big enough for 2 chairs and a cheap grill, where we took the dog from her photo to the vet and argued about how much to spend on medicine and then spent all of it. When she stood to leave, she touched the side of my face like she was checking the temperature of an idea. The next time we met at a motel in Tempe, off a road that seemed to exist only for hotels and places that sell tires. She brought takeout. We watched a game show on mute and guessed at the questions. We didn't sleep together then either. I told myself we were careful. I told myself we were kind. We drove to Sedona on a Thursday. She said she could slip away early because he was at a golf tournament. We were just friends, a phrase that felt like a joke we were telling the sky. The red rock made everything look small and holy. We sat on a flat shelf that hung over nothing and ate sandwiches we bought from a place that spelled avocado wrong on the menu. She took off her shoes and threatened to throw them into the canyon if I said anything corny. "Do you think you'll leave?" I asked. "I mean for real." She sat quiet, chewing, looking anywhere but at me. "I think I already have," she said. My phone buzzed. It was my friend Marcus, a man who has saved me from myself more times than I can count. He sent a single line, "Be careful, man." I put the phone face down. I told myself I was careful. we passed a sign for a vortex and laughed like we both weren't the kind of people who would have no idea what to do if the ground actually started spinning. On the drive back, she put her feet on the dashboard and hummed along to a song I didn't know. She told me about growing up in New Mexico, about a dog named Peanut, about how she wanted to learn how to throw pottery because she liked the idea of holding something that used to be mud and telling it to be a bowl. 3 months that way. Hotels near my job when I had a late meeting. A cabin someone lent her about an hour out where the stars looked like someone shook a jar of sugar. Coffee in my car in a Target parking lot while the sun went from red to yellow and families walked past with paper towels and cereal. Sometimes I would catch her looking at me like I was a station she could finally rest at. Sometimes I would catch myself checking the mirrors every 30 seconds as if shame itself had a badge and flashing lights. She didn't wear a ring. There was a faint tan line where one should be. I asked once and she said she took it off at the gym. When we were in Sedona, I saw a ridge of pale skin around her wrist where a smartwatch might go. She said she'd stopped counting her steps because it felt like a test she kept failing. I noticed small things like that and stored them in the back of my head like you store batteries for smoke alarms you hope never go off. The day it turned, it rained. Phoenix rain is a rumor until it's a flood. She texted that she was driving to me but turned around because the streets were ponds. 10 minutes later, she sent a different text. It came in pieces, a series of sentences that felt like someone running downhill and tripping. He took my phone and my cards. He says, "I can't leave. I'm okay, but I'm scared. I can't call. I can use my iPad for a minute. I'm so sorry to ask this. I need $3,000 to get an apartment, just to get out while I file, a deposit, and first month. Please." There are messages you remember, like you remember the smell of your father's car or the name of the first teacher who ever told you your writing meant something. That one sits under my skin like a splinter I'll never find. I called her, but she said she couldn't answer, only text, only quick. She sent a photo of a bruise the size of a plum on her knee and said it happened when she tried to grab her bag and he shoved past her. The photo didn't show a face or a room, just skin and a corner of a blue towel. "I'll get it back to you," she typed. "I promise. I just need to get out." I had the money. I told myself she wouldn't ask if it weren't urgent. I told myself, love, even the kind that doesn't have a name yet, is a thing you put on a table when someone says they're hungry. I sent it. The bank app gave me confetti for completing a transfer like I'd achieved something. I stared at the tiny fake celebration and wanted to throw my phone into the storm drain and watch it bob away. She sent 6 messages in a row, fragments of hugs typed quickly, a thank you, a I love you that landed on my screen like something dropped, and then an apartment number and a promise that we would be together soon, and shouldn't we go back to Sedona when this was over, like a nod to a future we could pin to a map with our fingers. For a week, she texted every morning and every night. She sent photos of sunsets I could have found online but wanted to believe were hers. She said the apartment was empty but safe. She said her lawyer was a woman who used to clerk for a judge who hated men like him. She said, "Soon." I said, "Soon." I let myself say I love you back. I let myself imagine finding her hair in my sink like a sign I lived with someone. I let myself be the man with oranges on his counter and 2 toothbrushes by the faucet. Then, nothing. It started small. A text that said, "Be right back," and then, "No be." An unanswered picture of the street vendor near my office who makes the best Sonoran hot dogs I've ever eaten. A voice memo that sat in the ether with the little circle next to it, meaning nobody had listened. By day 3, my stomach felt like a fist. By day 5, my phone was a brick that I lifted and set down and lifted again, a ritual that made me feel both ridiculous and devout. By day 7, Marcus came over and stood in my kitchen and listened to me talk in circles until I tripped on the same word every time. "What do you think?" I asked. He looked at my bowl of oranges. He leaned on the counter. He didn't look at me the way you look at someone you pity. He looked at me the way you look at someone you care about who is about to run a red light. I think if someone loves you and has your number, they use it, he said finally. If they can't, they find a way. If they won't, they don't. I said, she's in trouble. He said, then call the cops. I said, she told me not to. He said, she told you a lot of things. I didn't sleep that night. At 3 a.m., I searched my texts for clues like a parent tearing apart couch cushions for a lost remote. The apartment number she'd sent didn't have a street. I scrolled back and found the photo of the bruise and wondered why anyone would set a towel like that on the floor. I clicked the info button on her contact and saw the email associated with her messages. It wasn't a name I recognized. The avatar was a flower. At 9 a.m., I called the boutique and asked for Lena. The woman on the phone said no one by that name worked there. She sounded bored and busy, the way people sound when they aren't part of your story. I laughed in a way that was not laughter. I walked outside and stared at the sky until my neck hurt. At noon, I did the thing that made me feel like I was betraying her, which turned out to be the first real act of loyalty to myself. I called the non-emergency police number and asked what you do when you think someone is in danger, but you're the only person they'll talk to. The operator took my name and number and the address of the general area where Lena had said she lived once, a cross street near a grocery store with cheap bread and good coffee. Do you know her last name? The operator asked. I gave the one she'd given me. Do you know her date of birth? She asked. I said no. Do you have a vehicle make and model? She asked. I said no again. Felt like a man reporting a missing person I never actually met. She promised to send a unit to knock. She didn't have a door number, neither did I. 15 minutes later, a number I didn't know called. The voice introduced himself as Detective Alvarez. He asked me to come down to the station if I had time. Time was all I had. He met me in a room that looked like a waiting area without the magazines, put a coffee in my hand, and asked me to walk him through everything. I did, starting with the app and ending with the confetti in my bank. He asked to see the messages, the photos, the apartment number without a street. He nodded and wrote notes in a small book I found myself trusting, like if something is written down, it becomes true. Here's what I can tell you, he said when I ran out of words. There's a couple that runs this scam. We've been following it for a while, but they move and they're careful. She uses different names. He is sometimes her husband and sometimes her brother. Sometimes he's a jealous ex. The story changes, but the shape doesn't. I stared at the table because staring at him felt like it would make the room tilt. A couple? I said. He nodded. She meets men on apps, usually the ones that seem kind in their messages. She tells them she's in a bad situation. She waits a while, it's never immediate. She makes it feel like a relationship. Then there's an emergency, usually 3,000 to 5,000. Enough to hurt, not enough to make you call a bank manager. I wanted to say, that isn't me, that I am a man who can spot a con. I wanted to say I grew up with a father who could smell a lie like smoke. Instead, I said, how many? Dozens, he said. It started in New Mexico. There were a few in Nevada. 2 here that we know for sure, maybe more. People don't always report when the thing they lost wasn't just money. I felt something rise in my chest that wasn't tears and wasn't anger and wasn't shame, though it had pieces of all of them. It was grief for the version of me who believed he could save a stranger with a wire transfer. Can you get it back? I asked. I hated how small I sounded asking, like a child who dropped a toy in a storm drain. He didn't pretend. Probably not, he said, but we can add your report. It helps. Patterns help. Sometimes that's the only way to pull on a thread until the whole thing shows. I gave him everything. Screenshots, dates, the motel name in Tempe, the photo that might be a bruise, the apartment number. That was probably a random string. He wrote it all down. He thanked me like I was doing him a favor instead of asking for the world to give me back $3,000 and a little piece of my hope. When I got home, the apartment felt like a skin I could finally step out of. I took the bowl of oranges and put it in the fridge. It looked cheap there, wrong and cold, but it made me feel like I was rearranging something that mattered. Marcus came over with tacos and beer and a face that said he'd seen this before in other people and still hated it for me. "You're not stupid," he said before I could say it. "You're not naive. You're a person. They picked you because you're kind." "I don't want to be kind," I said. "Not if it makes me easy." "That's not what did it," he said. "What did it is they rehearsed a story and you walked in without a script. We ate on the floor like teenagers. We watched a documentary about glass and how it's both a liquid and a solid if you're feeling poetic about it. I fell asleep on the couch and dreamed of red rocks and falling shoes." She didn't text the next day or the day after. 2 weeks later, Detective Alvarez called to say they'd matched the apartment number to a parcel locker someone had rented under a different name. He said there'd been withdrawals from 2 different ATMs after my transfer, both near a strip of road that sold tires and also happened to be the same place we once ate takeout and guessed at questions on mute. He asked if I wanted to see the footage. I said no. I didn't need to memorialize my own lesson. A month later, I got a message from a man named Drew. He'd found me through a private group online for people who had been scammed. His message started with, "You don't know me," which felt like the most honest sentence anyone had said to me in a while. He said a woman who sounded like my woman told him a similar story about a trap and a phone taken and a deposit. He sent a photo. Her hair was different. Her eyes were the same. "Does it help to talk?" he asked. I told him it might help not to be alone with it. We spoke on a Thursday night and compared details like veterans comparing scars. His amount was $5,000. He'd sent it through a different app, the one with the green icon. He'd saved voice notes with her laughing. He played one, and for a second, my chest went hollow, like an elevator had dropped inside it. "It isn't your fault," I said, trying the words on like a coat I hoped would fit him. He laughed in a way that wasn't laughter. "I know," he said, "and I don't know." We made a small club. 3 more men joined within a week. 1 from Nevada, 1 from Santa Fe, 1 from Tucson. We counted losses and then tried to stop counting them. We shared screenshots with Alvarez when he asked. We stopped using her names, as if not saying them would make them smaller. We said only she, and the word stretched to cover all the different versions of her that had walked into our lives with an iced tea and a look that said, maybe. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my boss. I told Marcus and Drew and the other 2, whose names I learned to say in a way that made them feel like mine. I told myself over and over that I didn't have to hate her to heal. Hate is heavy. I wanted to be light. One night, months later, I drove back to Sedona. The parking lot was full of people with water bottles the size of small children. I climbed to a spot we'd sat and took off my shoes because I wanted to feel something under my feet that wasn't a floor I'd helped pay for in a place I'd never been. The wind made a sound like a low violin. I stood there until my calves shook and my breath felt like an argument I didn't need to win. On the way down, a woman asked me if I'd take a picture of her and her boyfriend. I did, and they looked at each other the way people do when they still believe all their days will agree with them. I handed back the phone and hoped they were right. When I got home, there was an email from Alvarez. He wrote that an arrest had been made in New Mexico on unrelated charges. He wrote that our case would be bundled into something larger if the DA thought it made sense. He wrote that there was no guarantee I'd see my money again. He also wrote, "You did the right thing reporting," and I printed that email and stuck it inside the kitchen cabinet where I keep the salt and pepper, a private trophy. Some mornings, I still woke with a start, as if I'd been called from another room. In those seconds, before the day told me what it was, I would think of her voice pitched low in a hotel hallway, of the word soon typed in a hurry, of $3,000 changing hands without touching skin. Then the light would come into the room, thin and persistent, and I would get up and make eggs and brew coffee and carry on being a person whose default is to give. I just added locks where there used to be none. She texted once, a number I didn't recognize that turned familiar when the words hit. It came late, the way confessions and threats do. She wrote, "I'm sorry, we needed it." He said it would be the last time. I stared at he like it was a nail poking through a board. I wrote, "Take care," and put my phone in a drawer and went for a walk. It's easy to imagine a version where I replied with a speech that would turn her to salt. It's easy to imagine knocking on doors and putting up flyers with the words scam and thief and a photo with the sunglasses on. I didn't. Sometimes justice is just another word for gravity. It doesn't need you to shout. It needs you to stop pretending you can fly with pockets full of stones. I saw Drew in person once. He came to Phoenix for work, and we met at a coffee shop that used to be a gas station. He looked like a man who works hard, the kind of man who keeps a screwdriver in the glove compartment just in case. We sat and told each other the things we didn't tell anyone else, and then we talked about baseball and the best place to buy work boots and the way the desert sky looks like a lie you want to believe every night around 6:30. We paid the bill. We shook hands like men who know what it costs to put your palm in a fire and leave it there. I don't think about her every day now. Sometimes a smell catches me, the citrus of someone's perfume, and I remember the ridge of pale skin where a ring should be, the blue towel, the way she held a sandwich like it was a ticket. Sometimes I pass the motel in Tempe and my chest folds for a second and then unfolds again. The world doesn't owe me my money or my time back. It gave me something else, a boundary I can carry, a story I can tell with my name at the front and my dignity intact. If you ask me what I learned, I'll say I learned that compassion isn't a currency. It's a light you keep in your own hand. You can shine it on someone in the dark and still not let them take your wallet. You can love people in trouble and let the ones who built their trouble live in it without you. The app still lives on my phone. I don't open it often. When I do, I look for the smallest things. Someone who smiles like they mean it. Someone whose first photo isn't a parking garage. I'd like to believe I'm not afraid. I'm not sure that matters. Fear isn't a fence if you know how to climb it. One night, the sky breaks open over Phoenix the way it does, like a dare. I sit by the window and watch the street turn silver. In another life, a phone buzzes and a story starts. In this one, I set my own down and let the rain do its work. I pick up a book and read a page aloud to myself because sometimes you have to hear your own voice to remember it's yours. I sleep. I wake. I make coffee. I carry on. 2 questions for you as I close the door on this. When someone says they're trapped and you have the key, how do you tell the shape of their cage from the shape of your need to be a rescuer? And when your kindness is tested like a wire pulled too tight, where do you put the post that keeps it from snapping? If this story hit home or made you think, stick around, drop a comment, and subscribe.